Hello all, welcome to the day 2 video session of database testing from QAtestingtraining.com. This is Satish. In my previous video, I was talking about what is data, how data is important, where we need to store data, and then what is database. Okay, so in today's video, I will talk more about what is SQL, and then we will try to create a sample database and work with tables. So as part of today's agenda, we will see what is the definition of SQL, and then we will also see the DDL and DML commands, which are the basic commands for SQL. Okay, so let's get started. So what is SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. So SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and this is the language used to work with the databases. Okay, so it might be any database. For example, it may be Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle or SYBASE or MySQL, or it may be any other databases. Okay, so by all these databases use SQL as their basic language. Okay, all these databases, the syntax for the SQL might be different or varying from one database to other database, but the basic concepts of SQL will remain the same across all these databases. Okay, so if you learn SQL and then if you are able to work with one database, it's not so complicated to work with other databases in the market. All you have to look at is the syntax, okay, of whatever database you are working on. Okay, so SQL is a structured query language which is used to work with the databases. Okay, so what you will be working with the database? You will be working with the data. You will try to insert the data, or you want to update the data. Okay, so the main purpose of database is to store the data. So if you want to store it, or if you want to retrieve it back from the database, you have to have some kind of language. So that language is called SQL. So SQL stands for Structured Query Language, which is used to work with the database. Okay, and then there are different types of databases which are available in the market from different clients. Okay, so if we get into the details of SQL, there are two basic commands which are called DDL commands and DML commands. Okay, so what is a DDL command? DDL command means data definition language. Okay, and then DML means data manipulation language. Okay, so data definition language, that means you are working with the definition or structure or schema. Okay, all these names means the same. So definition or structure or schema, all these names means the same. So you are trying to create the structure to hold the data. Okay, so for that purpose you will use a DDL command. So what are DDL commands? There are three types of DDL commands. One is create, alter and drop. Okay, so for example, we all know that the data is stored in a table in a database. Okay, so if we want to create the table structure, we have to use create command. Okay, so if we want to create the or alter the structure of the table, we will use alter command. And then if we want to drop the structure completely, that means deleting the structure or getting rid of the structure, we will use the drop command. So all these create, alter and drop are commands used to work with the structure. Okay, so once the structure is ready, now if you want to insert the data or update the data or delete the data, in that case you will be using the DML commands. That means, see, data manipulation language. That means you are working with the data. But then in DDL, you will be working with the definition. Okay, so that's the difference between DDL commands and DML commands. All right. So before starting with the code of DDL commands and DML commands, I want to tell you that I'll be using Microsoft SQL Server Database, okay, which is installed on my machine. If you want to install Microsoft SQL Server on your machine, you can go to the link below, okay, and then try to download the version according to your system configuration. There are two links which you can see, the 32-bit and 64-bit. So depending upon your system configuration, you can download these files and then install the database on your machine so that you can work with the SQL. Okay, and then there are two editions which are available. One is called Evaluation Edition or the Express Edition. Both are available free. The evaluation version, the evaluation edition will be available for 6 months, okay, and then it will be expired after that. And then Express Edition is free. So either of these you can install and then start working with the SQL. Okay. So now let's get started with the creating the structure of a database. Okay. So for that we need to connect to database. So if Microsoft SQL Server is already installed on your machine, you will be seeing SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, so this is the tool used to work with the databases. Okay, so if you click on that, you can see SQL Server Management Studio is being opened. Okay, and this is the connection window where you have to connect to the server where SQL Server is installed. Okay, so in this window, the server type you can see as database engine. Okay, the database engine means the database engine is, it has all the databases which are installed, okay, or which were created on this server. Okay, so select database engine and then the server name where the database is installed, and then the authentication. The authentication means the username and password. So in SQL Server there are two types of authentication modes. One is called Windows authentication and the other one is SQL Server authentication. Windows authentication means it will take the username and password of the system which you are logged in. So I am logged into my computer as Satish, okay, as Satish and oblique vanilla. Okay, so that's my username. Okay, so it takes that username and password of the machine and then it will give you authentication to SQL Server. Okay, if you select SQL Server authentication, a login and password needs to be created by the administrator, and then you can use that login and password to connect to database engine or the SQL Server. Okay, so for now let's connect using the Windows authentication mode. So select that Windows authentication mode and then click connect. So this is the tool which is called SQL Server or Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, or it's also called as SSMS. Okay, so if you try to connect to SQL Server, you will be seeing on your left side as Object Explorer. The Object Explorer means whatever object you want to explore, it will be available on this in this Object Explorer. What is object? Object means all the tables or views or functions or stored procedures, all these different types are called objects in SQL Server. Okay, so a table is also called a object. So all different items are called as objects in SQL Server. Okay, so this is the server name which is highlighted. This is called the server name and the SQL Server. Okay, and then this is the version number and then the user who is logged into this server. Okay, and then if you see a folder called databases, all your databases will be under this folder. So if you click on that plus sign, you can see all different databases which were created on this server. Okay, so if you try to create a new database, that will be available under this list. So if you click testing database, for example, you will see all these different object folders. Okay, so like tables, views or stored procedures will be under programmability. Okay, and other folders too. So if you try to create a table in a testing database, that table will be existing under this tables folder. Okay, so for example, here we have customers table. Okay, so if you try to create a new table, it will come under this tables. Okay, so if you want to create a table in any other database like new database, that table you can view under this tables folder under new database. So these are different databases. These are different databases which were created in this server. Okay, so if you want to write SQL code, all you have to do is click on the new query window. Okay, so here in SQL Server or in any database language, you will call SQL statements as query. Okay, that means you are querying the database. For that you will write SQL statement. So that's called as query. Okay, so whatever query you want to run, okay, so just select that query or just select that query and then try to click the execute button or press F5. So that query will be executed. So where you are executing that query? In one particular database. Okay, so how do we know that it's running against a particular database? So for that you have a drop down list. Okay, so here you have all databases which are available in this server. So if you want to create a table in testing database, so you have to select that testing database and then if you write a command in this query window, that query will be executed and table will be created in this particular database. So if you want to see that table, you will have to click on the testing and then go to the tables folder. Okay, so if you want to work in a different context of a database, you will change that database. So whatever database you click here, that's available, that shows here, the query window will be related to that particular database. All right, so let's try to create a database. Okay, for example, if we take qatestingtraining.com, the website where many users will be visiting this website every day. So if you want to save all this user information into a table, you will have to have a database for this application. Okay, so for that purpose, I'll go to my SQL Server Management Studio and connect to server. Okay, and then I'll try to create a database. So I want to create a database. So the syntax for creating a database. Okay, create database, and then the database name. Okay, so that's the basic syntax of creating a database. Okay, so now I want to create a database with the name QA testing training. Okay, so create database, and the name I want to give as QA testing training. Okay, and then now if I select that particular statement and then try to execute it. Okay, so before executing, you want to make sure that when you are creating a database, you want to be in the master database. Master database, model database, MSDB database, and the temp database. These four databases are called system databases. That means these databases were created by Microsoft when they developed this product. Okay, and these databases are used to store system level information. Okay, so for that reason, you have to be in master database while creating a database. Okay, why master database? Master database is important database for SQL Server to start. It stores all the information for the SQL Server to start. It will store all that information in this particular database. So if this master database got corrupted, or if there is something wrong with this database, SQL Server will not start. Okay, so this is kind of the first or the starting database of SQL Server. Okay, it will store all your login information and everything. Okay, so that's the reason it's called as master database. So if you are trying to create a database, you have to select the master database and then you have to create a database. So once you are in master, try to select that particular statement which you want to run against master database. So if you don't select this particular query, if you just run all your, if you just want to run all your statements which are in this window, then all you have to do is just don't select anything, and then if you click execute, all your queries in this window will be executed. But if you want to run particular statement, then you have to select it and run that particular query. Okay, so right now I just want to run this particular statement and then click execute. So it says command completed successfully. Okay, so this is the window where it will show you all the messages. Okay, so now my command got completed successfully. Now if I go to databases and then click refresh, you can see QA testing training database got created, and then a basic structure or basic model or basic template of the database is already been created. Okay, that means these are the default structures of the objects. Okay, where you will be creating your objects. Okay, so that's my new database. So we have used create command. So if we go back to our window, we can see if we want to create any definition or any structure, we will be using create command. Okay, so for creating a database, we have used create command. So this is creating a database using SQL code. If you want to do it by graphical user interface, you can right click on databases and then click on new database, and then you can give the database name as, for example, QA testing. Okay, so that's the database name you want to have. And then if you see the options called database files. Okay, so whenever you create a database, two files will be created automatically. One file is used to store the data. So whenever you create a database, two files will be created. What are those files? One is called data file and the second one is called log file. Okay, so what is a data file? Data file is used to store the data. Okay, for example, if there's a user on this particular website who visited today, okay, so if you want to store his information, for example, let's say his name is Robert, so want to store that information in a table in a QA testing training database. That particular Robert will be saved in a data file. Okay, used to store data, and then the log file will be used to store the operations, or it's called log, or it's used to store the log. That means whatever you are trying to do on a SQL Server Management Studio, all that operations will be stored in the log file, and all the result of those operations, okay, like data. Okay, so that data will be saved in the data file. Okay, so the data file will be created by extension MDF, that's called master data file, and the log file will be created as extension LDF, that means log data file. Okay, so if we go back to our Management Studio, so there are two files. One is called, see, if you can see here, there is a file type. The first file is rows data, that means it will try to store data, so that's called data file, and the second one is called log file. Okay, so these are the initial file size properties. Okay, you can always change them, and then these are the paths where those files will be saved. Okay, and then the file name will be the database name will be given to that file. Okay, and then if you select all these properties and then click OK, your QA testing database will be created. So if you refresh the databases, you can see QA testing database also got created with the same template. Okay, so now you know how to create a database using SQL code, and also through using the Management Studio or using the graphical user interface. Now we have created a database using create command. Now you want to create a table structure to hold the data. We know that data is saved in database, but it will be saved in the form of tables. Okay, it will be exactly saved in the tables, and the table will be created under the database. Okay, so now we want to create a table. So before creating a table, we want to know what is the definition of the table, or what would be the definition of the table. The definition of the table will depend upon what data you want to store. For example, if we take qatestingtraining.com, and then if we want to save all the users who are visiting to this website, if we want to save their data, we want to create the structure. Okay, so what data we want to save? So let's say we want to store users information. Okay, and then what information exactly? Maybe what is the user first name, and then the user last name, and then user email ID. Okay, so we just want to save all this information, and then maybe let's add user city and then user country. Okay, so we want to save all this information. So for example, let's say there were three users who visited our website. So their first names are something like this. Let's say Robert, and then his last name is Delan, and then his email ID is something like robert@gmail.com, and then he is from Los Angeles, and then country is USA. So that's my first user, and my second user is Bill Trabosh, and then his email ID is bill@yahoo.com, and then he is from Dallas, and then the country is USA. Okay, and let's say my third user is Chad Miles, and then his email ID is chad at, let's say, rediff.com. Okay, and then he is from, let's say, Tampa, and then he's also from USA. Okay, so now I have all this information. Now I know I want to store all this information in a database. So now you know the requirement of creating the structure. So what type of structure or what type of data you want to store. Once you know this requirement, you have to create a table. So for that, you can syntax for creating a table. So you are creating the structure. So you will be using the DDL command called create table name. Okay, and then open bracket, and then here you want to give the column names or column list. Okay, it may be 1, 2, 3 or any number of columns. Okay, and then close the bracket. Okay, so that's the syntax of creating a table using SQL. Okay, now let's go ahead and create the table. So create table, and then the table name I want to give as user information. Okay, so seeing the table name, I can say that table holds the user information data. Okay, so if you are working in an organization, the table names, the database names, everything will be followed by company standards. Okay, every organization has its own naming conventions. Okay, so you have to follow that naming conventions. User underscore info. Okay, and then the column names. What column names I want to give? First name, last name, email ID, city, and country. Okay, so I'll just remove that user and then give the column names. So first name, and then the last name, email ID, city, and country. Okay, now I know I have to create these columns. Okay, now and in the syntax we also have the data type of columns. That means every column needs to have or needs to be defined with a data type. So what is a data type? Data type will tell you what type of data needs to be stored in that column. Okay, so data type is nothing but what type of data you are storing in that particular column. Okay, for example, if you are trying to store some numeric values or some integer values, okay, so you will have to use integer data type. Okay, and then if you want to store some characters or some names, okay, you will have to use variable character data type. Okay, if you are trying to store date of birth, Okay, there's a data type called date time, which is used to store date time values. Okay, so integer, varchar, and date time. Okay, for example, why we have different types of data types. Okay, so if you are trying to store integer values, okay, it may be 1 or 100 or 200 or like 30,000 or something. Okay, and then for all this, the space will be consumed to save these particular values in your hard disk. Okay, so for that, for storing these values, 2 bytes of space will be used. Okay, and then for saving the characters or strings, okay, let's say characters. Okay, so for each character it will be used 1 byte of space. Okay, so that means if you take Robert, if you want to store Robert on your hard disk, it will take, there are 6 characters, so 1 byte per character, so it will take 6 bytes of space to store Robert. Okay, so these are the different data types which will be used to store all your values in your hard disk. Okay, so in our table, the first name will have characters, right? So for that reason, you will have to use varchar, and then you can just give the length. That means first name will allow 100 characters max. Okay, and then if you try to give more number of characters other than, I mean more than 100, your application may fail, or you can fail that application, or you can truncate. Okay, you can just take first 100 characters and then insert the data. The remaining characters you will just ignore. Okay, and then the last name, let's say you will allow 150 characters. Okay, and then the email ID you want to allow, let's say 50 characters, and then the city varchar 20 characters, and then the country, let's say 50 characters. Okay, so all this giving the length for the data type. Okay, you will just don't do it like that without any research. Okay, so depending upon the requirements, you will give that information. Okay, so now you have all your columns and then their data types ready. Okay, and then I also want to create another column to just say integer, and then you want to store, you just want to give some user, some ID to that, to each user. Okay, like if you have a bank account, there will be a bank account number, right? So something like that, you just want to give some user ID. Okay, so now all my table structure is ready, so I want to select that and then execute it. So my table has been created, but then we have done one mistake. What it is we have created under master database. Okay, but then the database which we want to create is under QA testing training. Okay, so you can always go and drop that table from master database if you have created it. That's fine, we will talk about how to drop it. Okay, but for now let's try to create the table under QA testing training database. Okay, so I will have to run that query again under that particular database. So if you go and refresh the QA testing training database and then see under tables, you can see the user information table got created. Okay, so this is the SQL code for creating the table structure. You can also do it by graphical user interface. So right click on tables and then new table, and then you can give the column name and then the data type. Okay, I will talk about what is nulls Okay, and then you can create any number of columns here, and then right click on that, and then once you save table, that table will be created. You don't have to write the query. You can do both ways. Okay, now we have the table. Now let's try to insert some data. Okay, all this data we want to insert, all this information we want to insert into that or save into that table. So now you are working with the data itself. Okay, so for that reason you will use the data manipulation language commands, that is the DML commands. So we have insert, update, delete. So now we want to insert the data into the table, so we will have to use insert command. So what is the syntax for insert? Insert into, you have to provide the table name and then the column list. Okay, and then the values. Okay, so that's the syntax for inserting the data. So now I want to insert all my users. Okay, so insert into, what is our table name? User information. Okay, and then what all columns I want to insert the data into? User ID, and then the first name and last name and the email ID, city and country. Okay, so now I want to insert all my data into all these fields. You can insert into few columns, okay, or all of the columns. And then the values I want to give as all this information. Okay, I'll just copy and paste that. And then when you are trying to give characters, you have to provide them in the single quotes. Okay, and then just say comma and the single quotes. So all values will be in single quotes, and then each column data will be separated by a comma. Okay, and then I also want to give user ID. Okay, let's say the user ID is 1. Okay, and these, as this is the integer, you don't have to provide between quotes. Okay, only the characters or strings need to be provided between single quotes. Okay, so now my query is ready, and then I want to run that query against QA testing training. So select that query and then execute it. Now it says one row affected. That means one row got inserted. Okay, similarly I want to also insert the other information. So just copy the same command. Okay, and then now insert this second data. Okay, and then my third user is Chad Miles. Okay, so now I already inserted Robert, and then now I'll try to insert bills and chat information, and then I want to make sure that the user ID, I'll just try to give a unique ID to each user to identify the user. Okay, so now I want to run these two queries at the same time, and then run against QA testing training database, and then execute it. So it says one row got affected for the first insert, and then the second statement, one row affected. Okay, so now I have inserted all my users into the table. Okay, so now you know that you already inserted. Now how do you view that data, or how do you get that data back? Okay, so for that purpose you will have to use a command called select. So select star from table name. So that's the syntax for viewing the data from a table. Okay, so you are selecting the data. Okay, what all columns you want to see? All the columns. Okay, here we have user ID, first name, last name, email ID, city, country, right? All these columns, if you want to see, you will put it as star. Star means all the columns. Okay, so I'll just okay, and then from table. Okay, that just provide the table name, and then it will get you all the data. So I want to see all my data in table user information, and then I will try to run that particular query against QA testing training database. So now if you can see in the results window, you can see 1, 2, 3, all your 3 users, Robert, Bill and Chad, all their information got selected. Now it's confirmed that you have the inserted data, the data really got inserted into the table, and then it's already saved in the table. Okay, so now you can see all this data. Okay, that's how you view your data. Now that's the insert command. Okay, now if you want to update some data, okay, for example, we saved all this information, and then in future if the user comes in and then he wants to update his city, okay, let's say Chad or Robert, okay, or Bill, he wants to update his city name. Okay, so for that reason we have to use the update command. So you want to use update, that means you are still manipulating the data, not the structure. Okay, so before that I want to tell you about the where clause. Okay, so what is where clause? So now when you did the select star from user information and then executed it, you have seen all your users or all the data which is available in the table. For example, if you want to select only few records, okay, so here one particular row is called one record, the second record and the third record. So here we have 3 rows, or we can also call them as 3 records. Okay, now if you want to view only Robert information, okay, only those users whose first name is Robert, so for that reason we will use a where clause, where first name is equal to Robert. Okay, and then if you try to run this particular query, you can see only Robert came up from your query. Okay, so that's how you use the where clause. And then if you can also say if there were 2 Roberts in your table, so 2 records will come up, and then you can also say and last name is equal to Dland. Okay, so if there were 2 users with first names Robert and last name as Dland, and the other last name is something else, okay, not Dland. Okay, now if you want to select Robert with the last name Dland, all you have to do is where first name is equal to Robert and last name is equal to Dland. So that's how you can confirm that only one record showed up. Okay, That's how the where clause is used to filter the data. Okay. Now we know that how to use where clause. We will see how to update the data. So as I said, Chad wants to update his city from Tampa to something else. Let's say Key West. So now I want to update the data. Update syntax. So the update syntax is update and the table name. Okay, and then set column name is equal to new value, and then if there is any where clause. Okay, so now I want to update Chad's data. So what I will do, I'll just put in as update, and then what table you are trying to access or update the user information, and then what column you want to update. You want to update city column. Okay, so you will say set city is equal to what is the new value you want to set to Key West. Okay, and then where clause. If you just try to run this particular query, okay, if you try to run this, all the information in the table will be updated, because you didn't say that only Chad's information need to be updated. You didn't say it anywhere in your query. Okay, so for that reason you have to put in a where clause where first name is equal to Chad. Okay, so let's see first name is equal to Chad, and then you want to update city to Key West. Now if you run this particular query, you can see one row affected, and then if you go and try to view the data in the table, you can see Chad's city is now turned to Key West. Okay, that's how you use the update statement. Okay, so you can also update two columns at a time. So if you want to update two columns, you will just separate the columns by comma, and then let's say what other column you want to update. Maybe let's say Chad moved to India, and then he want to update his city to Hyderabad and country as India. Okay, so now city is equal to Hyderabad and country is equal to India. Now if you run this particular query, so Chad's information will be updated. So if you go and run that query, you can see Chad Miles, his city is Hyderabad, and then his country is India. Okay, so that's how you use the update command to update the information. Now let's say Robert wants to go out from our website. That means he wants to delete his account. Okay, or he wants to delete his information. So for that reason we have to use the delete command. So still we are working with the data, so we are using the DML commands. So now what is the syntax for delete? Let's say delete from table name, and then if you want to write any where clause. Okay, so if we want to delete the Robert information, all we have to do is delete from the table name. Okay, and then the where clause, where first name is equal to Robert. Okay, so when you are trying to delete the data, you need to be very careful. Okay, because if you delete all the data in the table, for example, if you just run this particular query by mistake or by accident, all the data from the table will be deleted. Okay, so QA testers may not have permissions to delete the data, but still when you are writing queries, you have to make sure when you are working with the delete or update. Okay, if you update wrong information in the table will be messed up. okay, and then you will be into problems. So you have to be very careful when using the update and delete commands. So now I just want to delete Robert user. Okay, so all I will do is delete from user information where first name is equal to Robert, and then execute it. So one row got affected. Now if you go and view the data in the table, you can see only Bill and Chad exists in the table, and Robert got deleted. All you just cannot delete one column. Okay, so if you just want to delete Bill's city, you cannot do it. Okay, if you are trying to delete, you will delete the entire record. Okay, so that's how you use delete command to delete the data. Okay, now for example, my requirement got changed, and then I also want to save the date of birth, okay, of each user. Okay, so I want to save date of birth of each user. So now I want to create a new column in my table. Okay, so to save the information for date of birth, so I want to change the structure. So for that reason, I will have to use one of the DDL commands. Now I am trying to change the structure. The table structure already exists, but I am trying to change the structure. So for that reason, I will use alter command. So change the structure of table, or we can say we want to add another column to table. Okay, so for that reason, what I will do is I will use alter command. So alter, the syntax is alter table name, and then add new column name, and then the data type. Okay, so I'll just try to add it, alter table, and then user information, and then I want to add column date of birth, and then the data type is date time. Okay, and then if I try to run this particular query, command completed successfully. Now if I try to see my data, select star from user information, I can see a date of birth column got added, and then it's automatically defaulted to null. Null means we doesn't know the information. Okay, so if for example, if you are saving some information, and then every user may not give all his information, we might have some mandatory fields called last name, email ID, or first name, and then we might not ask city name, city, country, and date of birth as mandatory fields. Okay, so those fields are optional. So if the user enters that data, that information will be saved. If he does not enter that data, that information, we just put it as null. That means it's not known. Okay, so we just added that column, but then we did not have any information as of yet. Okay, but if we want to have that information, now for example, we added that column, and then the user, let's say Bill opened his account, and then he updated his date of birth, let's say 2001. Okay, he updated his date of birth. So once he updated, we have to run an update query in the backend. So update, what is the table? User information, and then what column we are updating? Update date of birth is equal to 2010-01, and then whose data we are updating? Whose first name is child, let's say Bill. Okay, and then now if we try to run this particular query, we can see one row affected. Now if we try to view the data in the table, see Bill's date of birth got updated. So that's the 2010 and this is the time. So we did not enter any time information, so it defaulted to 00. Okay, and then still child's information is not updated. So in future, if he updates his information, that column will be updated for child. Okay, so now we know how to add new columns in a table. Okay, now if we want to drop one particular column, now our requirement has changed and then we don't want to save the country information. Okay, so that's the new requirement, and then we want to have that reflected on our table. So for that reason we are dropping the table. That means we are changing the structure. So we don't want to have that column at all from the table. So we are dropping the column. So for that the syntax is drop table, alter table. We are changing the structure, right? Okay, so alter table and table name, and then drop column name. Okay, so that's the syntax. So if we want to drop that column, let's say alter table user information and drop column country. Now if you try to run this query, you can see command completed successfully, and then if you try to view the data from the table, you can see there's no country column at all. So that country column has been deleted. Okay, that column completely has been deleted or dropped. Okay, so that's how we use the alter command to change the structure. Now we also use the drop command to drop the column. Now in future I want to completely remove that application. Okay, or if I want to create completely a new table, now all the data has been all the requirement has been changed, and then I want to save the information in a different way. Okay, so something like that, and then I want the new requirement is we want to drop the table itself. So drop a table. What is the syntax? The syntax is drop table and then table name. So drop table and then user information. So you have to be very careful when doing the drop also, because once you drop the table, if you have permissions to drop, so okay, once you drop the table you cannot get it back unless you work with your DBA. Okay, so you need to be very careful when working with your queries. Okay, so if I select that particular statement and then execute it, so if you go and select your data, it says invalid object name user information. That means you have completely dropped it. There's no more table or no more data at all. Okay, now my another requirement is I just want to completely wipe out the database or drop the database called QA testing training. Okay, because we want to close out that application and then we want to create a database in another server. Okay, and then we want to just drop this database because it's of no more use. So for that reason you will say drop. So you have to go to master database because you cannot drop the database being in that particular database. Okay, so all this query window is under QA testing training. Okay, so for that reason you have to go to master and then drop database QA testing training. Okay, so if you run that, you can see command completed successfully. Now if you refresh your databases, oh sorry, I dropped the QA testing. Okay, so if you run that, now if you refresh your database, you can see the QA testing training database has been completely wiped out from this server. All right, so that's how you use the drop command. The QA tester may not have all permissions except select or insert or updates. Okay, but then you have to be very careful when you are doing your queries on SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, so all these operations, okay, like altering a table or like adding a column or dropping a column or dropping a table, you can also do it by graphical user interface. Okay, so let's say we have a database called testing, and then if you want to drop this customers table, just right click on that and then just completely delete it, so that table will be completely deleted. And then if you want to delete the database, just right click on the database and then just do delete. It will delete the database itself. Okay, so that's how you use SQL code to work with the tables. Okay, so in my upcoming sessions I will talk more about create, alter and drop, and then insert, update and delete for other objects like views, functions, stored procedures. Okay, which a QA tester or a database tester needs to have some information to work with other objects as well. All right, thank you all for joining my video session.